Hi, everybody online. I'm Lindsay Smith. I'm an associate professor here in the school. You guys all know me in SFIS. Today is our first research skills seminar. We're hoping to have more research skills seminars on these Monday morning slots. So if you're here online or in person and there's another research skill you would really be interested in having faculty and students talk about, as long as, like something very complex and specialized, we're not likely to be able to run a seminar on, but go ahead and ask. If there's something you're really wanting, let us know and we can find the experts and provide those skills to you guys, because I know we all need kind of lifelong learning and research methods and research skills. So today we're going to have some students, Katie and Julia, who are both PhD students in our program, one in IGD, one in HSD, at different levels. Katie presented in her first year, and it sounds like Julia also presented in her first year, but then across multiple years. Talk about their experience with posters, why present a poster at all, why it's a good opportunity. Talk about how they chose what to present depending on the stage of their work, because I think that's a challenge for a lot of grad students. It's like, well, it just arrived. What could I possibly present? Or do I have enough? Or are the findings robust enough? And then maybe tell you about what their experience was at our poster session. So SFIS has a poster session every year that you can submit to, and so does the Social Science Institute. ISSR also has a poster session that people can apply to. So there's a couple opportunities here at ASU, and most major conferences have posters. So this is a great skill to have and to begin disseminating your research. And they might end with some tips of things that they've learned over time. So I'm going to hand it over to Katie and Julia to share their experience.
Julia's done more than I have. I've done posters in other settings as well. So I guess I'll just start with my experience last year. I presented at the spring SFIS poster session, and I had been working on a project that I was going to be presenting at a conference, and it was kind of in its early stages. And I was advised by the project advisor to put it on a poster and take it to the SFIS poster session. And I hope that's a hopeful story to tell, because we weren't really in a place to like share results or anything like that. But what it gave us the opportunity to do was to put something, get our thoughts organized, get ourselves in a place where we could talk about the topic, and get feedback from people from a diverse perspective, a set of diverse perspectives. So in terms of picking content, I was in a situation where the poster session was a really good tool for what I was trying to do. And I found that it was really helpful at an early stage of a project, because that's one of the really nice places to start getting feedback about the process, to see if there's anything you need to do to make adjustments. So I found it very helpful in my first SFIS one. So
yes, hi. I was part of every single SFIS poster showcase, because I do think that it's an incredible opportunity to practice your public speaking skills, and also just, as Katie was saying, kind of like make sense of what's going on in your head. One advice that my advisor gave me when I was kind of like trying to put together one of my papers was, why don't you try to do a presentation on it, so like you can see the flow of your argument, and a poster is not too far from a presentation. So kind of the same line, putting things together, like seeing clearly where your framework is, where your argument is, what's your methodology, what are your results, what's important. It's so helpful when you're kind of like in the early stages. And it helps you see also what's missing, because if you don't have results, you know that you're missing the results. If you don't have like a recommendations or like a conclusions that brings something new, then you know that something is missing in your argument. So my experience with the SFIS poster showcase has always been really good. I presented in my first semester as a PhD student, and I was so nervous, but at the same time, it was such a great experience to just get over that first nervous feeling of talking to your faculty, and it's new faculty that only know you for like 4 months. You've only known them for 4 months, so it can be very nervous and anxiety inducing. But it was such a great experience. I came out of it so much more confident in what I was bringing to the table. And in terms of what to bring, my first semester, I'm part of the IGD program. So my first semester, I brought the like project that we did in one of our classes. And it's not necessarily related to what my dissertation is about, but it's something that I was interested in, and it was again just something that we came out with, and it was like, this is nice, we should show it to the other SFIS people. And from there on, I started bringing the topics that was coming out for my dissertation, and I'm looking at one of my posters because, well, I'm not doing that anymore. So, but that, you know, that really helped me with my perspectives, because it was part of my perspectives. And again, it's just like putting together the figures and all the parts really helped me understand what I was doing at like where my theory was and so on and so forth. So it's just very helpful in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the nice things about posters is they really lend themselves to being a tool at any point in the process of a project. Like I think, like I've said, and as Julie has also said, going early and getting feedback on where you're at is helpful. Getting the chance to section out what you're talking about in a visual way that is, you know, the goal is to make it understandable. Making visuals, that kind of stuff can be really helpful early on to start formulating what you're thinking about. In general, and specifically for the topic you're talking about, it can also be helpful just to start getting the language and like start talking to people. What I found was, I started out you set the poster up, and there's a bunch of posters in the room, and people start walking around and they stop in front of your poster, and they, they're like, okay, tell me what's going on. And then you start talking. And what I found is that the beginning of the poster session, I had a specific way I was starting. And then by the end of the poster session, based on the questions that people were asking me, I actually started talking about my project in a different way, which I didn't expect, but it was also helpful to see like the way that conversations and that kind of like discussion back and forth shapes your work and the way you think about it, is kind of one of the cool pieces of poster sessions. Yeah, and I think the other thing that is really maybe less about your work, but I also found really helpful is when I got the chance to step away from my poster and go look at other posters. This is SFIS, this poster session is really cool because we have all of the levels. We have, undergrad all the way through our graduate degrees, and getting the chance to walk around and talk to other people about their work and see where they're at in their process of their projects and the way that their posters look. I got ideas for my next poster. And, there's different ways that visuals are easier to understand. There's, different ways to even just, set up the poster, talk about it, that kind of stuff. So it really lends itself to, and then if you're further along in the project as well, and Julia said there's also the opportunity to run results by people and talk about, am I setting up the framework to explain these results in a helpful way. So whereas presentations can be a little bit daunting, like, slide deck presentations can be daunting when you don't have some kind of set result. This is such a cool opportunity to, even if you have an idea about something or are starting to collect literature on a topic and starting to formulate ideas about something, this specific poster session feels like a really good place to like running that by people.
Yeah, because you also notice what people are more like drawn to in your poster. So maybe for you, the most important thing or the most exciting thing is the theoretical framework. But then people keep coming to you because they're looking at your data collection. They're like, oh, the methodology that you use to collect this data is beautiful. And then you understand that maybe when you're writing your paper, if you're still like kind of like conceptualizing everything, it's like maybe I should shift a little bit and put more emphasis on my methodology. And that's the cool, innovative part of my work. That's something that happened with me actually, because I was one of my projects just shifted because everyone was so interested in something that I wasn't giving that much attention to. And then they were like, wait, this is like a good methodology to use. I was like, me methodology? Sure. But yeah, and another thing too is that, as you were saying, you can go around and walk and meet new people. And that's a great way to also meet new faculty, especially if you don't have classes with them. You can just have a very like casual conversation with them. It's a great experience too. I don't know if you've ever had that said to you that you have to learn how to kind of pitch your research in like a sentence. And that's like the most difficult thing ever because everyone's research is so complex. But when you're presenting a poster, you have 5 minutes, if any, then you get really good at finding the 3 things that you think are the most important and most like cool about your work, and you put them together, and that's your go-to every time you have to introduce yourself, and now you know how to introduce yourself. And that's something that I learned going to all the poster sessions because I had to learn that.
Yeah, yeah. I also, it was also helpful for me, and we can do tips and tricks later, but especially being in the process of a project, having an idea of what kind of feedback would be helpful from people was also nice. So usually they would have questions already, like you would talk and then they would come with questions, and that would be a lot of feedback as well. But I think about halfway through the session last spring, I started saying at the beginning, this is in process and I'm trying to decide some things. And here's what I'm wondering about, does this framework make sense? Do you think I'm missing anything in the literature? That kind of stuff, which when you're talking to faculty and other students can be helpful, because like I said, one of the great things about our school and this event in general is getting everybody all in one room who have such diverse perspectives on different kinds of literature and different kind of methodologies, different kind of frameworks and stuff. So getting that back and forth, and also, yeah, the process of having to capture somebody's attention and explain the meaning behind your research very quickly is a really good process to learn how to condense things into kind of the important pieces, which I can imagine and is helpful in then the writing process, or the further presentation process of your work. So.
Yeah. And it definitely doesn't have to be, I know that a lot of times, especially in graduate school, are kind of pushed to present something that is complete and it needs to be perfect. Especially with the SFIS poster showcase, that is not the case. I think this is the first semester that I'm going to present something that is actually finished. Shocker. Since the beginning, I would present something that it was not finished, and sometimes I presented the same poster, but I would add things to it, and it's like, hey, I noticed that last semester I didn't include this thing. Now I'm included, and it's good too. Like, again, I'm looking at my old poster. I'm like, this is where I was, almost a year ago, 2 semesters ago, and now I'm doing something like that. Brought me to where I'm at now. If I didn't do that piece, I wouldn't have ended up with what I'm doing now. So definitely you don't need to present something that is complete. You can, like, it's a good exercise to present something that it's not complete, and it's a good exercise to get in the mood to ask for specific feedback. If it's the methodology, if it's the framework, if it's how to analyze your data, you can definitely do that. You can say, hey, this is like, I have this strong framework and I know my case study, but I'm struggling with the data collection part, and I'm looking at ways to collect the data with this target audience, or I'm not sure what target audience I can go to, like who can I do interviews with? Like it's very non-threatening, but you're in the SFIS poster showcase. You can ask this question, and it's good practice to learn for specific feedback instead of just opening yourself to receive anything.
Which can be overwhelming.
Which it definitely can be overwhelming, but again, set your boundaries and like, I'm really looking forward for your feedback, if you have feedback on the methodology, because that's where I'm struggling.
Yeah, it can help to break that down.
Yeah.
Cause having 50 people walk by your
Mhm.
poster and say things at you can be like, I don't even know what to do with that. But it can be helpful to kind of guide some of those conversations as well.
Do we have any questions for them? From the audience, online or in person?
I don't see any as
Yes.
When did you start making the posters? So I guess when, like. Yeah, I guess, when was the earliest you started actually, developing these posters?
So you mean like actually putting the things together?
Yeah, I guess I'm talking about more like, did you start like in your undergraduate? When was the first, when did you make your first poster? I guess?
Oh, okay.
For me, it was my undergraduate. It was, I was in the honors college, so we had to do a thesis and I made a poster out of my thesis. And back then I made it, it's like, right, like I wrote by hand. on the poster. And it was, but yeah, that was my first experience, with that. I actually did not do posters during my master's. I love doing posters. It's right now it's like a creative outlet for me, so it's great.
Yeah, but your first poster, it was complete, like with result of just.
I mean, it was an undergraduate thesis, so sure. It was complete, like I left it there, like I didn't do anything else with it, but it was more so just like a theoretical analysis of historical events, I guess.
There's an online person. Kevin Rogers was wondering, can you elaborate on realizing that research to presentation won't always be complete? What is the strategy for that?
Yeah. I also struggle with that. I think so. This is my second year in a PhD program. But any process in research, no matter what level you're at, there's always this feeling of needing things to be finalized and also never feeling like your work is finalized enough, which is an awkward place to be in. So I think having the specific questions about the work and where you're at was helpful for me in like saying like, this is the work I've done. This is the stuff I'm still unsure about, which gives me like a direction to take the conversation instead of just being like, well, this is where I'm at anyway. But having like Julia has also said, like specific questions of like, I'm struggling in this place, or I want this project to do this. How can I have it? What are your thoughts on that? Because that helped me like emotionally feel like I was, because it can be daunting to be in these spaces in academia in general. It felt like I had a little bit more control over the conversations around my work and made it feel like I had a direction to take the work after the conversations were done. Does that make sense? Does that kind of answer your question? I don't know if Julie, you have thoughts too.
Yeah, I think too, to kind of like counter that feeling of being overwhelmed by all the feedback, you can also say, this is outside of the scope of this paper, or this is outside of the scope of my work, and that's fine. There is so many ways that one very small topic can be approached, whether it's the theoretical framework, the methodology, the data collection, who are you talking to, what kind of data you're collecting, how you're analyzing the data, how you're interpreting the data, how you're writing the conclusion. That's fine. Everyone can look, and that's the beauty of it, right? Everyone can look at one topic with different point of views. You don't have to. You can pick one and try to go with that one. And then of course, if it doesn't work, then you can maneuver around it. But some things are outside the scope of your work, and that is fine. And then I think too that as you get more comfortable in what you are presenting, I feel like faculty appreciate that as well. When I say, oh, actually, this is not what my work is about, it shows that you know what your work is about and what you're interested in and what you are bringing to the table instead of just like trying to catch everything that flies around your head.
I have another question online. Also, Kevin said thank you. Both very insightful. Bonnie was wondering, I struggle with conceptualizing how much to include on the poster and the scope of the poster versus the scope of the work at its given stage of development. Are there any templates or guides that are available to help with that element?
Yeah, there's definitely templates. I believe, actually, SFI, ASU does have templates for posters. So you can use those. Personally, I don't use templates, but that's because I really like putting things together and the graphic and the design of it all. In terms of like actual content, if you're in the process of putting things together, pick something that you think it's good. If you have like a whole prospectus, pick something within the prospectus that, or the paper that you think it's really interesting, or you think that there's something there that you can develop, right? From there, then you break it down. How did I get here? And that's your theoretical framework. How do I want to move forward? That's your methodology. What do I think I can, what are the results that what do I want to find out? Those are your preliminary, or like your assumptions, or and but that's it. You don't have to explain everything that you do. You just have to pick something that you think it's really interesting, and there's something there, and then you break it down. And if you want templates, yeah, there is like a lot online. Those two, they do help in terms of like, okay, what's the background? What's the methodology? What are the results? What's the data collection? And so on and so forth. But yeah, just find something that you think it's interesting and there's something
Is this goal to show faculty what you're researching, or outsiders as well? Because if it's the latter,
Mhm.
I feel like when you run your stuff by me, I have no idea what the heck you guys are studying.
Yeah, yeah.
What you mean? You're able to translate it to me. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's like, maybe keep what you just said in mind and like write it down in your book and use that conversation. Or, run it by your partner, or your landlord or something, or the guy at the gas station.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the most part, it feels like it's mostly in SFIS, but I think that it's open to, I'm assuming other people can come by. One thing I think is also interesting about that though is like, because our topics are so varied, I think sometimes we don't know a ton about each other's work either, unless we've been in classes or work with different faculty. I don't know that I did this, but a thought that just crossed my mind is it might be interesting as a part of like your conversation to ask where somebody's understanding is at, and like maybe help them, if the theoretical process is something that you need to work on translating or something like that. Because especially because we're working in interdisciplinary spaces in SFIS across the board, it can be helpful to learn how to like gauge an audience's understanding and work on translating that. So I can imagine being like, oh, have you heard the news about this specific thing? Or, what do you know about this technology or this process? And then being able to, and then that's good practice, being able to like, well, okay, I gotta adjust the way I'm talking about this because I'm talking to someone with a different level of understanding.
And also, I think it's something like you have to learn, and this is like from the public speaking part, you have to learn what they would like to hear. If it's someone that does not know anything about my general topic, they're probably not wanna know about my theoretical framework and my methodology. They would like to know about the results and how I think they could impact society, because they're part of society and they understand. I do gender inequality. They understand some sort of gender inequality of what it is, right? They're probably not gonna understand when I talk about like statistics of things. So even then it's like, okay, but then maybe you get a faculty member that is on the theoretical side of things and they wanna really know about like how you got to that point. So sometimes it's also like understanding that you can't cater your work to every single person. However, you can facilitate a conversation about the points of your work that can be better digested by different people.
Right.
Thank you guys so much. We're gonna move to the next part of the workshop, which I think is gonna focus a little bit more on that. Just know it's concise and visual. It just has to be visual. I mean, if you guys want to take a moment and look at these posters, the ones that really stick with you have graphics. And if you start, and especially if you're in kind of a more traditional or humanistic social science, you might not be used to making visual representations of your work. They aren't necessarily like graphs and charts that come out of your data analysis. So thinking about what kinds of visuals you'll want to put in. I think Julia's is a great example of conceptual visuals. So is
The pink one.
yeah, the pink one.
Okay.
All
And
the
then
posters
this
are
one in
pink.
the middle, you can see that some of them, their visuals are very conceptual, they're not data results. The one right behind you is data heavy, and so the visuals are the results of their data. But either way, whether you have like quantitative results, heavy papers, or a conceptual analysis, the poster as a medium requires visual aspects. In fact, all papers could benefit from visual aspects. So timelines are a great way to have a visual aspect. A conceptual framework is a really helpful way to do it. Charts of the processes that you went through are really good ways to do it. And again, it's just not a wall-mounted paper. Often the first draft of a poster looks like a wall-mounted paper. You've just written that, yeah.
Quick question. So I know that a lot of the posters like kind of look like the same template with the maroon.
Yeah.
Can you, I guess, you don't have to use those, right?
No.
You could like make
Well-
it as,
They're supposed to stay within the AAC guidelines. But nobody cares.
You don't have to for our poster sessions. And for most poster sessions, you don't.
But you should stick to those dimensions.
Yeah.
Also, what you can do, sorry, I could have done it besides, like, if you look at mine, I didn't use it, but you can take the frame. So if you look at the one next to mine, the last one, you can take the frame and just slap it on top of it. So you can still use your own colors and everything, but technically you have the ASU.
Right.
Okay.
The ASU frame, like the standard ones you download from ASU are
Yeah.
that gold or the maroon. And all they are, and I can send them out, I have copies, just a PowerPoint slide with that
Oh,
border
yeah,
on it.
yeah.
And then you zoom in, so you can put inside the border anything you want. I don't see that that's a requirement, but maybe if someone knows otherwise, that we have to use it, I think it's provided to create kind of unity across that. I don't think that- If you're in a specific poster session at ASU, they may have additional guidelines.
Yeah, so I think Emma had a template when I used to do the CERT program.
She sent me it, and she said that it
It's not
was a
required.
suggestion.
Exactly,
Yeah, exactly,
yeah.
it suggested, not a
The
requirement.
dimensions are important for the printing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the dimensions matter, but that you use the ASU thing is more just to help you the first time.
And
you're
it
doing
is helpful if you've never done a poster.
And then there's blocks of text that go in. Most of them usually include the standard parts of a standard academic paper, which is nice. Because if you're thinking about your ideas and your work moving through the like academic life cycle, you can think of this as a really early draft of something. So you might use these to do a poster, and then you might present that research somewhere in a longer format for 30 minutes, and then you might try turning that into a publication. And all of those more or less are structured around the standard format. So it's helpful to keep your poster kind of in that standard format. And then, you know, you want to focus on big points. I think this is to Bonnie's question, like how much should I present? Less. You should present less than you think, like a small, tiny segment. So let's say you did a big survey and you asked 24 questions and 6 themes, right? Pick one theme, right? Maybe not one question, but one of your 3 themes, like health and well-being. If you asked about health and well-being and gender equity. So in your discussion and your methodology, you might point out that you did a larger study, but for the amount of a poster, you're not going to be able to go over all of those results. The same thing goes for a conference paper. And honestly, for most publications, it's very rare. You usually only publish one thing that offers a full overview of all of your research. We tend to publish papers that are narrowly focused on one aspect or theme of our research. And it's like a hard distinction to make. And I don't think there's an easy way to know where those lines cut. That's intellectual work. But that intellectual work will be helped by an exercise we're going to do in a second. So avoid long paragraphs. Too much text is the death of every poster. Your first version will have too much text. Show it to your advisor or friend. Cut it down. And then again, I said, make your pictures, your things visual. This is not rocket science. Probably everybody already knew this, but good things to keep in mind. So this is one of my students. This was her first draft. You know, we could talk about works or doesn't work, but it's helpful to send somebody a first draft, so it's like, okay, your references take up a fourth of it, maybe that's not the best use of your space, right? This chart looks really interesting, but nobody can read it because it's too small. So do you include it or do you make it bigger? So having something like that where you think about it, but this quote is good. Does it need to be so big? So again, you know, having a first draft where you try putting stuff on paper and then looking at the balance of all of it can be a really good time. And even if you don't print it, if you just create the slide and project it or show it to a faculty member, can be a really good time to think about, okay, this is my first attempt. She did a really good job of getting visuals up there, but then the question is kind of balancing it out. So. Okay, so the most important thing about any poster, any paper, any bit of academic work is that what makes it publishable and presentable is that you have an argument. Doesn't need to be anything without an argument that's just results driven isn't interesting. It doesn't have any, it doesn't contribute and it doesn't move things forward. So you can't publish or contribute without an argument. Now, notice I'm saying it's not without an argument. It's not without new finding. It's not without world-changing data, right? What you have to have is an argument that you are making. That's what is, it's actually the intellectual work you're doing, not your results that move it forward. So this is from Belcher's Writing Your Journal article in 12 weeks, which is a kind of interesting text if you've never used it. But she says that everything that's published in the world of academia falls into three categories. So one is it approaches new evidence in an old way, right? So we're going to look at innovation. And I collected new data about innovation in an emerging country, right? This country just formed, you know, Moldova or whatever. It has a new government. No one's ever collected data about it, but everyone's defined innovation according to the OPEC guidelines. So I defined innovation in that way. I used the standard surveys, but I got data about a new place. So that's new evidence, old ways. Another option is there's old evidence. This is a really common early in your graduate school. Like let's say there's already a survey that's been done or your professor's done it, or people have read Machiavelli 1,000,000 times, right? Like Machiavelli's existed. You can read Machiavelli, but you think about it in a new way. You're reading it in light of a recently published, in light of the presidential election, right? So you're thinking about something that is old. You're not collecting any new data, but you're arguing about it in a new way. The third one, which is the lowest hanging fruit of all, is old evidence and an old approach in a new way. So you could talk about Machiavelli and Venetian society, but you could bring them together using a quantitative analysis, right? You found old records, you digitized those old records. Tons of people have talked about Machiavelli and Venetian society, but nobody has used this methodology. So those are the common ways. So like the bar is really low. And the most important thing is not your evidence, but your capacity to bring your evidence in conversation with something new in an old way. Does anybody have any questions about that? I'm happy to share this afterwards if anybody wants it.
There were requests.
Okay, I will. So this is your exit. This is where we're going to think about it. Okay, so just like an truth in advertising, the poster session deadline for your abstract is October 6th. So that's at the beginning of next week, Sunday. So if you want to submit and do this, you need to write your abstract. And so at the end of this workshop, you'll have a draft abstract. So all of you guys can present your work.
So just quick with graphic design and getting a readable poster. Because like graphic design is more than just making something look pretty. It's making people able to easily read it. One thing Lindsay mentioned, you don't want paragraphs too big. I have learned in my classes that most people will read paragraphs or bodies of text where there's about 40 characters long from left to right. So that's like a little more narrow, but that's usually more readable. And try to break apart your paragraphs as much as you can. Like you see that big block of the paragraph right there. If that was the same amount of words, but just indented.
Like 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, I didn't go to English school, so I.
Photographed.
But yeah. So if you break it apart, that's easier to read, and if you can make it more narrow, the better. I know 40 syllables is not a whole lot of words, but just thinking about the time we're living in where we all read on phone screens and touch screens, that's just kind of where we're at. And it's also kind of close to how wide it is in novels. If you notice, novel pages aren't very big. That's because you're reading a lot of information at once and it's less intimidating when it's more narrow. The other thing is hierarchy. So if you look at this, what's the first thing you see on this page? If you close one eye and squint the other one way down. The picture, right? So the second thing you see might be the title, the research poster, and then maybe the tips down below, and you probably read this last. And that's fine for this because we're looking, you know, you look at the title first.
Well done, Lindsay.
No, it's good. It's like because this is about, this part is about the visual, it pops out. You want to look at the tips because if it's like the same, if it's just as bold and the same color as the bullet points, you may not even look at it. I say all this because it all depends on what you want your audience to look at first. So if you want them to look at the title first, you make the title big, bold, and possibly a different color. And you would have the image be smaller to balance it out. If you want the image to be the most startling thing, like that's the thing that you're researching and that's how you want to draw people in, then you would have a big image saturated in color like that. And you usually don't want the body of text to be the first thing you look at. It's like once you pull in their attention, then they look at the body of text. But that's what hierarchy is. And there's also hierarchy with the text itself. You know, like you have the bigger title and then you have your body of text and then maybe like the tips at the bottom. And I think it was well done. The rule of thumb with hierarchy there is the thing you want bigger, such as the title, you want it like probably twice as big as your text. Another thing you can do is make it, you know, really big, like sans serif is what that text is. And then the body text you can have be serif, which is like Georgia or like Times New Roman. Any way to keep them very distinct from each other is good, but you never want the title to be just as popping as, say, the image, because then the eye doesn't know which way to go first. And so whichever one you want people to look at first, make that one the most noticeable one. And strategically, I would say whichever hook you want, you know, say the image is like the juiciest piece that people will be like, oh, I want to learn more about this. And you make that one the most noticeable thing. It could be the title, and you know, you want that to be kind of a headliner type title, and you make that the most noticeable thing. But yeah, if you Google hierarchy in graphic design, there's so many tutorials about it, and it will like just make such a huge difference with your poster, and it will also help you figure out where you want your information and how you want it done.
Well, thanks to Katie and Julia so much for sharing their experience. Thanks to you guys for coming. I really hope that all of you will present at our poster session. Just a reminder, we give out money, cash money private for the best poster. So if you don't care about, if you're nervous, but you need cash, come present. You can leave with $50. All right, thanks everybody.